Welcome, Dem Go Bucks. We are here Tuesday evening, and it just seems that Jeremiah Smith has taken a trip over to Florida State. Just got off of an official visit, and it was his last official visit. So I think that might be turning into something. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Ohio State players have just recently come out, the star players have just come out and said, hey, you know what, we're going to play in this Cotton Bowl game. I'm not 100% sure that I believe them. There's still a lot of days before the Cotton Bowl, which is, I think, on, correct me if I'm wrong, it's on December 29th. But, a lot of days left over. But so far, a couple players are saying to the media anyway that they're going to be playing. And talk maybe a little bit about Michigan football versus Alabama, because I think that Michigan, nobody's given Michigan very much chance. But, I think it's going to be a little bit closer, if not Michigan winning the game all outright. But anyway, Matt, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing as well as I can considering there's no football happening right now, and we just have to wait for these bowl games. And the most exciting thing is probably the fact that we have 8 days until early National Signing Day. So that's going to be the hardest part about, especially keeping Florida players. Anytime you're recruiting down in Florida, it's really hard to hold on to those guys. So whether it's Miami, Florida State. Seems like the Gators are losing everybody, so no one's really worried about them anymore. But between Miami and Florida State, I'm definitely worried about Jeremiah Smith. I'm not like super concerned, but anytime you have the number one player in the country and he's taking a visit to Florida State, like you said, the last visit, it's always a big one. And while people have been reporting that it seems to be relatively safe, you got to take that with a grain of salt. I mean, look at Colorado, right? They came out of nowhere and landed Seton from who was supposed to be a bunch of these other schools. Ohio State and Tennessee and all these other schools were in on Seton, and then just Florida, Colorado came out of nowhere and just got him. So who knows how good the reporting is on all this stuff. But Jeremiah Smith, I mean, I'm feeling pretty good about our class, but we got to hold on to these top players.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. It's got to be hard to get a kid out of Florida and that sunshine to come all the way up to cold
Oh
ass
yeah.
Ohio. Um, I'm always wondering, like, but Ohio State does it though. I will say that they do it. They've got a pretty decent track record of getting guys up to Columbus, which, I mean, visually speaking, it's not very good. I mean, I've been to Columbus. Michigan doesn't
Yeah.
ever seem to get
Well,
guys
it's
from
much
Florida to
nicer
come.
in the summertime, but definitely in the winter, it's not the best.
Well, I'll tell you what, Michigan, Ann Arbor's only about maybe like 3.5 hours away from Columbus. So I I think Michigan's just lagging, to be honest. They could get those Florida guys, not if they really tried, but I'm just saying they don't have an
I mean,
excuse
can you
for not getting
imagine?
a
Can you
couple.
imagine if Michigan actually had some elite receivers to go with the rest of their team? I mean, it seems like your team is just elite in
Oh,
so many areas. Like the defense is elite, tight ends are elite, the offensive line's elite, the quarterback is elite. It seems like the only area really that you guys are lacking this year is at wideout. That's like your only weakness.
yeah, and those guys, I don't know. I mean, I don't think JJ is not great at when he's got to put air under the ball, throwing deep with air under the ball. He's great if he's throwing it on a
Yeah,
rope, but
yeah.
you just
Kyle
never
McCord
even see him do that.
had that same problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I mean, you're right though. Michigan does not have that really explosive passing game. And whether they don't want it to do it by design, which I doubt, you're right. There's something wrong there. There's definitely something wrong. You can kind of sense it. But getting back
You
to
know who could use Jeremiah Smith? Michigan.
yeah,
Are you guys even in on any top receivers at all?
not that I know of. Um, I'm sure we've offered them, but I don't
Yeah,
know that
but
we're in on any of them.
lots of news coming out of Florida. Not just Jeremiah Smith potentially going to Florida State or Miami, but also the Florida Attorney General launched an antitrust investigation into the College Football Playoff Committee. So that'll be interesting. I'm sure it'll go nowhere, and it'll just be, but nothing's going to come of it other than if potentially they can, get some discovery. Maybe we can see some emails going out there that make the committee look bad. That would be hilarious.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I mean,
that would be
I
amazing.
would just die to see if, like, you imagine like there's emails between the committee and ESPN and someone, some sort of collusion going on. You guys really, we're going to cost us $150 million if Florida State is in here instead of Alabama. So if you could pick Alabama, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, I know we've belabored the subject to death everywhere, but still, that was a revenue generated that was a revenue generated problem to solve they had. They
Yeah.
decided, hey, like they didn't say like, oh gosh, let's look at the film and see which teams are best and we'll come up with Alabama. They actually went in this committee, this fraudulent committee, and said, you know what? Here are the four teams we want. Now we have to go figure out how to justify it. That's where they started. They didn't try to do something fair or, watch the film, watch the tape. Like they basically just made a revenue decision, essentially.
Yeah. And so I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this in the comments because I've been sort of in favor of Florida State because I did feel like they were screwed. And, a team ultimately should, if they win their conference and if they are undefeated, they should have a chance to, you know, go to the playoff and prove it on the field. But, problem number one I have is with the whole committee, and I think we sort of touched on this before, their reasoning for moving Alabama above Florida State was they thought that they were one of the best four teams, and without their quarterback, they didn't think that they would be as good of a matchup or not as strong of a team as Alabama. So why would they only move them from 4 to 5, and why would they wait until now to move them down? Because Travis has been injured for weeks, and they just moved him
Mhm.
down in the last ranking. So that was part of the problem. It would have been a much easier to justify if he would have got hurt and they just moved him down like 4 or 5 spots, because that's potentially justifiable. Because you say if you're just going by who you think is the best, and Diego would disagree with me on this, but objectively, you could look at different statistics and see, you know, here are the points per game on offense and defense and everything else, and you could go by what your change has been since you lose your quarterback and how far that's dropped. Your efficiency on offense, how much worse it's been since your EPA per play on offense from the time you had Jordan Travis until afterwards. So that way it takes into account like the opponent you're playing too. So it doesn't, just because you have a harder schedule or an easier schedule, statistics can objectively look at that and tell how you're doing against that opponent compared to everyone else. So you can make that argument. And the other interesting thing is when you're, whether it's the AP or whether it's the college football playoff committee making a ranking, in the past, people have always had, there's always teams with like 2 losses that are ranked ahead of teams with 1 loss, or teams with 3 losses or 4 losses ranked ahead of people with fewer losses. But it seems like the only reason they have a problem here is because it's undefeated. So there's no issue when you're doing it anywhere else in the rankings. But if they're undefeated, for some reason, we can't change the rankings there. Like you could have their strength of schedule were pretty bad. I think it was 55th or something, Florida State. So they didn't have the best strength of schedule. Now their strength of record, showing how well they did against that weak schedule, was really good. It was like 11th or 12th. Still not as good as the teams above them. And Ohio State had the best strength of schedule and the second best the strength of record and the number 2 FBI. So under all these statistics, Ohio State is top 2 or 3 in everything, just like Michigan. And Ohio State wasn't even looked at or considered in any of this controversy, even though, like, if you looked at it through any of the statistics, we should be in there. So it's just sort of interesting. And Florida State is the one they're saying, oh, they're the ones that are screwed. But if you looked at how well they did against all the teams they played this year, Ohio State did a much better job than Florida State, even though they weren't undefeated.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like this committee does not burden themselves with being consistent or applying rules consistently. Yeah, it's they're very fraudulent.
I
That
mean, it's
that's
both
kind of
both
what
those
it
things,
is.
right? Yeah. I mean, if they would have at least had a, a rule that they stuck with, So if Florida State guy gets hurt, they're saying, the last day they were citing that paragraph in the rule that if someone gets hurt or if a coach is missing, you're allowed to punish the team. So why was that not why did that never happen throughout the year until the
Yeah.
last week?
Yeah, you know what's funny is because I have no love for Florida State. I mean, personally, I don't have
Yeah.
I don't have a horse in the race with Florida State per se, and I'm still enraged. You know what I mean? Like I'm still enraged about it just because of the unfairness and the obvious corruption that was going along there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
obvious, totally. I mean, it's not even the fact that like, oh, did they get the top four teams? Probably. I mean, you could make an argument that they did just on its own, like kind of like just yeah, those are the 4 top teams, okay, but you didn't follow they didn't even follow their own rules. They didn't even follow that like, if they're gonna use that, rule to say like, "Oh, the quarterback got hurt. Let's drop him in the rankings." If they'd have done that, like you said, right when
Hmm.
Jordan Travis got hurt, okay, at least they're saying, "Okay, we're gonna do that." Then it wouldn't be as bad. But they didn't. They waited to the last second, and then they compared them only to Texas and Alabama. They didn't compare them to Georgia. They didn't compare them to Ohio State, to Oregon. Like even in the same last ranking, they didn't do that. They weren't even consistent in their own ranking. It's just amazing. But again, that's been belabored so much that I'm almost
Yeah.
not wanting to even bring it up again, just because I get all heated again. But yeah, it's crazy. But so
Yeah.
with Florida State now threatening to go to the Big Ten, which a couple days ago it sounded almost like a sure thing. So, question for you: as far as someone like Jeremiah Smith, do you think that helps if he thinks that they're going to go to the Big Ten? Do you think it helps Florida State's case for Jeremiah Smith to go there, or doesn't it matter at all? I mean, what is your take on that?
Yeah. I
Other,
think it would help. I think it would help a little bit, just because maybe one of the drawbacks of going to Florida State would potentially be, you're not in a conference that's good enough that can guarantee you a slot in the playoffs. But that was only this year, because next year, you're in a 12-team playoff. So that issue is no longer uh, any kind. It's just no longer relevant anymore going forward. So I'm really not sure. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure that it would matter at all.
yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
I'm not.
other than just having better matchups, he's going to get to play against better competition. I guess that would help. Whether you're in the Big Ten or the SEC, you're going to be in one of the two premier leagues, and that's really all there is now. There's going to be two leagues. Everything
Mhm,
else is just you know periphery games that aren't relevant. But really, I mean, what
right.
else is there? I mean, there's just nothing. I mean, what is the you have the ACC, a couple teams, and you have the Big 12, which is nobody now.
Yeah, very true.
And
And
the Pac-2. Sorry about the Pac-2. We have
what
two teams over there still.
something else kind of occurred to me. If an undefeated team in the Big Ten, if that had happened and a player got hurt, a quarterback, there's probably zero chance that the Big Ten commissioner, the Big Ten brass would ever let it what happened to Florida State happen to a Big Ten team. There's no way. An undefeated team in the Big Ten, if it was Ohio State or Michigan, they're in. I mean, just because someone gets injured, I guarantee they would not drop Michigan or Ohio State if their quarterback got injured. Like no
Yeah.
chance. Because of like so yeah, there's another reason why Florida State fans should probably be outraged over all this. Oh, crazy. But anyway, thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Greatly appreciate it. That helps us out a lot, by the way. Before we get into our next segment, I think one question. I think one of the things I just saw was Ohio State star players like Emeka Egbuka, and
Yeah.
not Trey yet, but Emeka Egbuka, a couple other players have said they're coming back to
Denzel
play in the
Burke.
Cotton Bowl. Denzel Burke. Um, I find that very curious, and I'm
Yeah,
wondering
and
if they
Tyleek
just
Williams.
yeah, they're all coming back for the Cotton Bowl, which if they're planning on staying for another year, that would make sense, but I just don't see especially, um, yeah, Burke. I don't see him doing that. Do you think maybe they were just telling the media what they wanted to hear at the
No,
time, or what?
no. So what happened? Here's what happened, and here's what I think is going to happen. So what happened was all the Ohio State players after the season, the regular season ended. I think about a week, maybe a few days to a week ago. Everyone, put in their name to get um, their draft grades, right? So they all just got their draft grades back recently and where they're going to be projected. And I think a lot of them are borderline where it's not quite good enough where they could just sit out and just be comfortable with that. And I think people like Denzel Burke, he has a chance to go up against one of the top receivers in the country on Missouri, and he's probably like the fourth best receiver in the country. And if he can go and lock him down or have a good showing, that's going to potentially get him into the first round. I'm not sure where he's at now. I'm guessing he'd probably be a second round pick. And
Yeah.
then you have someone like Tyleik Williams, who's probably, just because he didn't really play much last year, he had a good year this year. I'm guessing he might be in the second or third round range as well. So, I think a lot of these players, most of them, they all said, I'm going to play in the bowl game, but I'm not decided yet on whether I'm coming back. So I truly believe both those statements. I think that they are basically going to play the bowl game and see how well they can do, hopefully perform well. And if they do play well in the bowl game, then they're going to go pro. I think we could lose, half the team to the NFL if they all have good games against Missouri. So it's sort of like you know, I
Catch
want them to win,
22.
but maybe not play super.
Yeah.
Have some questionable playing and just good enough to win, but then they all come back selfishly. Because we could lose like a lot. Like we could lose the entire defensive line. We could lose most of the secondary. We could lose all of our receivers. Our starting, we already lost one to transfer portal, and then we potentially lose Marvin and Emeka, then lose our running back, and we have no running backs left. Like if Travion Henderson doesn't play, like even in the bowl game, like we have Dallin Hayden. That's it. He's like the last running back on our roster.
Hey, Ohio State fans have been clamoring for Dallin Hayden all year
I know,
long,
but
and
but you
now
need
they're
to
gonna
have
get it.
more.
Now they're
We
gonna
don't
get
even
him.
have like even our walk-on running back has gone in the transfer portal because all of our running backs are so popular. Like Chip Trayanum is now
Right.
going to be the starting running back in Kentucky. Evan Spencer, or not Evan Spencer, what's his name? Evan Pryor left. I don't know if he's signed anywhere yet. And of course, Trayvon's probably, he hasn't mentioned it yet, but I was reading just 15 minutes ago, and the reporting seems to be that everyone is playing. I don't know if that includes Marv or not, but what I read was everyone is going to be playing in this game, which would be shocking to me. And speaking of that game, apparently Devin Brown is playing awesome, and they're really excited about how well he's throwing, his improvision skills, and he's very fiery type of personality. So he's really good at getting the troops motivated, and it's sort of like a semi backhanded compliment because because that was one of the things that Kyle McCord was criticized about. He was very calm all the time. He would never celebrate, even when they got touchdowns and stuff. And he wasn't trying to get the troops fired up in the last minute of the Michigan game or really any game hardly throughout the year. He's just very calm, doesn't ever show emotion. So, and he didn't even tell anyone that he left. Like he told like maybe two people on the team that he was leaving. He said most of the people that were interviewed today in interviews said that they didn't find out that he left until they saw it on Twitter. So that's
Yeah, that's
ridiculous.
a good
I mean,
way
you
to do
can't
it.
even tell the guy. I mean, he's been at Ohio State for 3 years, and he couldn't have like he couldn't be man enough to just tell everyone before he announces this on X. Like, come on.
Mhm. Well, so with all those guys saying they're coming back, I'm not 100% buying it just because there's a lot of time between now and then. You know, the 29th, there's a good, at least more than 2 weeks
No, but
there.
what do you think is going to be changing between now and then? Like,
I
why?
don't know.
They already
I
got the
tend
draft
to
grade, so they
I
know
tend
one way
to
or the other where they're sitting.
maybe you might be right. You might be completely right. Um, and I'll believe it when I see it that Burke is back there playing corner because I feel like he's probably maybe a lower first round pick, but you might be right. So if they do play, and the thing with Devin, like, so is that going to be kind of like like how are you going to feel if he goes out there and lights it up? Are you just
Well,
going to
I'll
be
be happy
really
for next
happy
year. Well, no,
and
it's
really
I'm gonna
pissed
be like every other fan. Yes,
about the
I'll
rest
be
of the
like every
year?
other fan. Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I
Everyone's
mean
gonna be
maybe.
happy and upset at the same time.
Yeah, that's going to be it. I mean, we'll see. We'll
I mean,
see.
what would
And
you do if you're the head coach at the beginning of the year? You think, okay, well, Kyle McCord and Devin Brown are very close. Some practices one is better, some practices the other one is better. But if I start Kyle McCord, then the other guy's definitely not going to transfer. And if he doesn't play well this year, we can always bench him and put the other guy in. Or if we can start Devin Brown, and then this other guy is going to be immediately checked out, and he's the older guy, he's been in the system for 3 years, and he's actually started a couple games. You don't let him be the starter, and I think it just, he's gone. So, it's definitely risky. Like if you really truly thought that Devin Brown was the better player, then you got to play him, though, right?
Yeah, it's difficult though after that Notre Dame game. I mean,
Yeah,
Kyle looked good. He brought him back. He didn't look great. I mean, he
yeah,
almost lost the game before he won the game
yes.
by throwing a sure
hmm
interception, if I remember right. But
Well, it
it's
went off the guy's
how are you
fingertips.
gonna
It wasn't. Yeah,
and Kyle almost brought them back against Michigan. I mean, he was coming back. They would have needed a touchdown to win the game, which would have been real tough in that time frame. And he's
yep.
having to throw the ball. He had to throw the ball, and it really I don't think that last play was necessarily all his fault. The offensive lineman got knocked over,
Yeah.
left a clear path to him. He could have probably bounced outside of the pocket a little bit, but um, I don't know. I don't know if it was the wrong decision or
Again,
not.
he
Good
has
news.
very limited mobility, whereas Devin Brown could have probably ran out of the pocket and made something there.
He didn't Kyle have a bum ankle too though?
Yeah, that also.
Yeah,
So
I
not the
mean,
best mobility, and he has a bum ankle. So
and
bad
Devin Brown
combination.
got hurt too, right?
He got hurt a while ago. I think he was healthy by that point.
That was just a bad situation. And Kyle lost the one game you can't lose, but it was just one game. So I don't know
Yeah.
from a coach's perspective, if I've got a guy who's winning every single game, went to Notre Dame and won the game not single handedly, but made an awesome play to do it. I don't know how you start another guy.
Yeah.
You know what I
No,
mean?
that's tough. Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough. But the good news is we're going to find out on the 29th because he's going to be playing.
Well,
You're going to get
yeah.
all
The
the
one,
Devin
the one,
Brown
the one
and
thing,
Dallin
the
Hayden
one,
you can muster.
the one problem is no Marv, and when Marv is not in, I'm just we have people that I'm going to be excited about for next year. I don't know how good these young receivers are going to be right now because they've not played hardly at all. I
Yeah.
mean, we're going up against a team that's Missouri only lost to Georgia by 8 points. That was a close game until the very end, and
The
it's a really
Buckeyes
good
are
team.
the Buckeyes are they're not favored though.
Underdogs.
Buckeyes are
They're two and a
underdogs
half
against
two and a
Missouri.
half point underdogs, but I don't know if that's factoring in like does Vegas already know the Ohio, because the Ohio State people that are saying that they're playing in this game, they just got the draft grades and they just announced this like today. So that line has been out for a while, and I can't imagine that these players already knew whether they were playing in that game or not because these draft grades are just now coming out. So I would be surprised if it stays at 2.5 if all these people are playing in the game.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, how do you know the draft grades came out? Did you actually see something about that?
Well,
I hadn't
I
heard
didn't
the draft
see.
grades came out.
They didn't report what their projected grades would be, but they said that that's when everyone, like a week to 3 4 days ago, that's when everyone requests their grades, and then when they get their grades back, that's when they make their decisions whether they're going to go pro or not. So that's just what I read that was reported on the last couple of days.
Okay. Very
So
interesting.
hopefully
Find
we'll
out.
get some actual leaks of what the projected rounds are going to be, because you can make guesses, like you said, like Burke is he's probably borderline. He did miss a little time this year too, and he wasn't as good last year after having a pretty good freshman year.
Yeah.
So probably another. I mean, you could always come back and try to get that top 10 pick, because if you have one more elite year as a senior, you could potentially go in the first top 10 picks. But he's also a safe, like, late round, early second round pick, especially if he has a good game against one of the top receivers in the country and in the bowl game. So
Yeah. I mean, Burke corner is a coveted position in the NFL. Now, running back, I think Travion needs to go. And I'm if you're reading the tea leaves, it's sounding like he probably will. But he's a little bit injury prone. He had a strong end to his junior year, even though he didn't do great against Michigan. I feel like he should go. I don't know if he will, but in my
yeah,
mind, especially being a running back and not really having the longevity not being there,
oh, especially
probably needs
him
to
being
go.
injury issues. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I would never, as much as I like him as a player, I would never recommend a running back come back. Your NFL lifespan is way too short, even if you don't have injury issues. I mean, there's very few Adrian Petersons in the NFL that just play forever, whereas most running backs are getting 4 or 5 years if they're lucky, and that's it.
Hmm. Very true. And speaking of one more thing about the quarterbacks, guessing Cam Ward is not coming to Ohio State.
Cam
I'm
Ward's actually supposed to go to Miami now.
Is he? Yeah, I read something it's like Ohio State was I don't think even in his top 4, top 5 anymore. But
Yeah, I don't think that Brian Day is going after a quarterback. I think he's happy with our quarterbacks and is telling the collectives to spend the money on linebackers, safeties, and offensive linemen, which I
interesting.
think is as long as you're comfortable with, we have two good quarterbacks on the roster, one really good one coming in, as long as we keep Aaron Nolan. Now, the one problem is, so we didn't talk about this yet, but Dylan Raiola, who was the number one quarterback prospect,
Yeah, that dude.
was committed to Ohio State. Then he was committed, to Georgia, and now he's committed to Nebraska. And so, Georgia has a few days to get him back, but it looks like Nebraska has offered him $3 million, and his agent wants to see if Georgia can match that. It doesn't sound like they're interested in doing that.
Hmm.
So it looks like Georgia only has one quarterback right now, who is a 4-star guy, and they're supposedly happy with him. And they're also, I heard they were potentially going after our quarterback now, Aaron Nolan, but
Oh,
I don't think, yeah. So again, like all this, there's so much shakeup in the last little bit. So if we lose Aaron Nolan, I'll be really pissed. But I just heard like one comment about that today, so I haven't heard anything serious. But it's always a concern. But any of that stuff comes in late, and we ended up losing. Notre Dame got their quarterback, who everyone. It's funny,
Antoine,
right?
that's
Because
a good comment.
Notre Dame had their quarterback, the Duke guy. He's transferring, and
Yeah.
he was basically, everyone said that he was going to Notre Dame before the portal even opened. So how is that possible if there's no illegal bribes and stuff going on prior to the portal being open, right? I mean,
There
everyone's
probably
doing that.
is, but I mean, they are probably doing
Probably.
the kids
How was he
probably
crystal balled to Notre Dame before it even opened?
the kids are doing their own research too. I mean, before they even go that route, I'm guessing. I mean, they all have like agents, like sort of, So I don't know if the school actually did anything. Maybe there some representatives did. I don't know. I'm not sure
Well,
how the
I'm not.
rules
Yeah,
work.
I'm not saying the
And
school did. They do all
the
this stuff back channel. They're
NCAA
like,
doesn't care about
yeah,
that anyway, unless it was Jim Harbaugh doing it. Then the NCAA would
yeah.
care deeply. But yeah, and
Well, I think a
Paul,
lot of the
social
stuff is just
media.
really hard. I think this stuff is really hard to prove. Like the only reason that Harbaugh even gotten in trouble for all this stuff is right because someone got all this information on him and turned him in. The NCAA wasn't investigating Jim Harbaugh. Someone gave him all this information on a silver platter. They weren't doing the investigation. Like it's very rare that the NCAA actually finds stuff out on their own, and like something has to happen, and it falls in their lap, and they're like, oh well, I guess we have to do something here.
Yeah, maybe either that or they're going after Jim Harbaugh, which wouldn't surprise me. He's kind of a fiery individual.
Well, not maybe. There was
Calling
there
for
was
profit
no.
sharing, calling for
I
revenue
mean,
sharing for the players. Like
yeah,
literally, no one likes that. Nobody wants that. The conferences don't want that. The NCAA doesn't want that. They don't care about the NIL because I don't think that doesn't come out of their revenue at all.
no.
NIL, but you've got a top coach coming out and saying, hey, waving his arms around saying, give revenue to the players. I mean, what do you think they're going to do? Oh my gosh. Of course they're going to come after you. So that's my conspiracy theory a little bit, but hey, that's how I feel.
Yeah, well, they had a new proposal that the NCAA chairman came up with, and it's going to be voting. They're going to be voting on it soon. So I haven't read it all in detail, so I don't fully understand it yet. But I know it was going to allow. Did you read this? So they're going to have like some sort of separate um, NIL structure through the schools, where the schools can opt in, but every student athlete is paid like $30,000 or something in your whole
Really?
school. So for Ohio State, it was going
It
to
should
cost
be that
us
way.
it was going to cost $15 million per year for Ohio State because of all the sports programs they have. And that's
Yep.
the baseline. If you want to like do this, you have to baseline give everyone 30,000. And then obviously the bigger schools are going to give more than that.
Yeah, very true. And Brian's right. The NCAA is aware of a lot of that stuff, and they don't do anything. They kind of pick and choose where they're going to go with that. Yeah. And Antoine, another good point. Yep. He keeps talking about paying those players. That's a lot of money coming out of a lot of their pockets, the NCAA and the conference, if they
So
start
while
revenue
I
sharing. That's
think that is a
basically the Michael Jordan. Everyone's going to be Michael Jordan taking a cut out of Nike. And that's not even I don't even know if that's sustainable. It would have to be such a tiny percent to be able to play. So, I mean, it would have to be a decent amount, but yeah,
well, the other interesting
getting
thing
himself
is
in
I don't know
trouble.
if you have you followed Nate the NIL lawsuit that was filed by former players against the NCAA, where they're defending. It's like a $4 billion lawsuit where all these past players, and from the past, I forget how many years it was, like the past 6 or 7 years, all these players want to be able to get reimbursed for not having any NIL opportunities. So it's
Yeah.
a $4 billion lawsuit, and I don't know how, I mean, maybe Michigan's best chance is for the NCAA to go bankrupt and then they can't get in trouble.
That might be the shorter slash longer game they're playing there.
That would
It's
be
a
that would
roundabout
be hilarious if that
strategy.
happened.
Yes, I am all for that. That would be the warmest of fuzzies if that ever happened.
Yeah, there's been
But
a
yeah.
lot of stuff where the NCAA didn't do anything. Like Kentucky they had wiretaps, and who was it? Was it Kansas? They had like the FBI involved with them too, and nothing happened. Their coach just got an extension. They didn't do anything to him. Like, I don't know. And then
Of course not.
North Carolina had fake classes, for to keep their players eligible. Nothing happened to them. I mean, there's been an amazing amount of these instances where the people just no one got in trouble for like I just can't imagine with the FBI involved in wiretaps and all this stuff, and then nothing happens. But again, like I didn't follow any of those that closely. I heard some of them they probably got off on technicalities. You know how that always happens with the law. You have
Oh yeah.
these silly lawyers and their technicalities, right?
I know. I know. I see the diplomas behind your head, those fake law diplomas. It's right there behind your head right there. But yeah, it's very true. So one last thing, just for a minute, I wanted to talk to you about Michigan and Alabama. 'Cause we'll talk about that game in more detail as the weeks go on. But what are your thoughts on that game? It's Michigan. I think it's going to be a really close game. Personally, I think it's going to be an ugly, close game. Um, so what are your
If
thoughts
you
on that?
guys,
You think
if
Michigan's
you
gonna
had,
win?
if your offensive line, your right guard, what's his name, the guy that got hurt?
Oh, yeah, Zach Zinter.
Zinter, yeah. So he was an All-American. He's your best offensive lineman. If he didn't get hurt, I would have a lot of faith that you guys could win this game. I still think you could win the game just because, you know, Milrow is not the most accurate passer. Your pass defense is just fantastic at forcing turnovers. You lead the NCAA in return touchdowns, I believe. Um, but he's also really good at scrambling around and making big plays on the pass game. So that's like a really interesting matchup, and it's super hard
Mhm.
to get after a quarterback who's he's a big guy and he's a running quarterback. He's going to be really hard to tackle. Now he's going to take he does take a lot of sacks, but he also makes huge plays. So it's just going to be one
Yeah,
of
he
those
does.
games. Like, does he make enough big plays to overcome some of those sacks and inaccurate passing, because his completion percentage isn't the best either. So he's just either makes big plays or he's a bust. So it's high risk, high reward type of a player, and just not an elite offense, not an elite Alabama offense by any means. So it's
Mhm.
they but they do have a great defense, except for some reason Auburn was able to run on them. Now I don't know if I don't think anyone else really had a whole lot of success running against them this year. I know their run defense was still like only like 40th or something. So it's pretty terrible for an Alabama team,
For
right? I mean,
Alabama, that is.
44th and run defense. So, I hear Michigan does like to run, and the Alabama
Stubbornly.
run defense is not the best. So it's one of those things. Like I'm guessing that first half is going to be low scoring, other than maybe Milrow makes a big play one way or the other, or both.
Yeah,
Makes a big touchdown pass and also throws an interception, gets sacked and fumbles, something like that.
it's going
And
to be the
then,
Milrow game.
in the second half, like, I don't know. I mean, they were able to shut down that Georgia run game though. So I mean, that was an amazing performance against them. So
Hmm.
it's tough, especially when you get Saban that much time. He doesn't lose too many bowl games, and
That's true.
Harbaugh conversely does not win very many bowl games. So it's like
No.
it's like the James Franklin factor. So any game where James Franklin is in, you're going to subtract a few points because he always makes stupid mistakes. And then for Jim Harbaugh, you got to take off some points because it's a bowl game, right?
Well, Vegas, for some reason, the line is sticking with Michigan being
Yeah,
favored. I don't get it. A lot of times I trust Vegas, but I guess we'll see, and that'll be interesting. But
yeah,
we'll leave it at let's leave it there.
yeah,
We'll wrap it up here. We'll talk
yeah.
about that game a lot more. We'll talk about the Buckeyes and what transpires from all of this. But thanks everyone on the chat for joining in. Thanks everyone, appreciate it. We will talk to everyone later. Have a great night.
All right, go Bucks.
Go Blue.